Welcome back to Take 10, Leadership Series podcast with Y CEO Cameron Corder and myself, Jasmine Bullard. In part 2, we continue the conversation with Leadwell CEO Jon Kidwell on command and control versus people-centered leadership.
So do I lose some of the structure and accountability, though, toward my people if I'm more people-centered?
I don't think so. And here's why I say that, because accountability is such an interesting idea. I always love to joke around with the accountants of like, accountability really is just, are we accountable one side of the ledger to the other? And so the one model of that inside of a command and control is, I said, get this done by Friday. Another model of accountability is, hey, Cam, we have this really big project. Here's what's at stake. Here's when this event is happening. What does the turnaround look like for when can you get this completed? Oh, I can get this done by Friday. Great. That also works for me. I see that playing into the timeline. Now you and I have actually engaged in that accountability together. But one of the key differences is you have ownership because you actually just told me the deadline. And so we are still accounting to the thing that we said, but we've done it together. There's a mutual agreement on that accountability, which means that it is more likely to be held to, that when you have an influence in your accountability, if I come in and just say, hey, you really need to change your diet and exercise, you're going to be like, great, jerk. But if you go through something and you are like, you know what, in this stage, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to change this. I'm going to change that. You're more likely to follow through on that commitment. You may still need outside support. You may still need outside accountability. You may still need outside resources, but you've already bought into that because you were part of the decision.
Yeah, that's good. I think when I've had discussions with friends, people talking about people-centered leadership, the pushback sometimes is they feel that that's too soft, or too lenient.
Yeah.
What's your response to that?
Yeah. Guilty is charged, right? I mean, I have, and I totally have been, and it's something, honestly, I mean, I don't know, I could be the lone wolf out here, but I still have to remind myself of some of these things that are so people-centered, and they're just not commonly seen as that. And so actually me being much more nice and just keeping you happy is not well-being. It's not empowerment. It's not growth. That is me managing you to circumstances. And that's not helpful. But me actually prioritizing clarity, because as people, all of us want clarity. We absolutely hate when things are ambiguous. We love clarity. When I look at that and say, maybe one of the most people-centered things I can do is get to the last uncomfortable 10% of truth, that, hey, I'm a huge fan of you, Jennifer, and I am such a fan of you, and I see so much potential in you that we need to talk about last week's event, that we need to talk about the project that we just completed because you did really great in these areas. And these three aren't at the level of excellence that as an organization, we need moving forward. And I'm here with you. I'm telling you these things because I see your potential. I know you want this too. You can grow. How can I help you? Like that level of truth and uncomfortableness is more people-centered than what sometimes we see on the surface. And what I'm very, very guilty of is looking at it and saying, you know what? Instead of being well, I'll have people be happy. Instead of growth through getting uncomfortable, I'll just kind of push people along, or maybe put them in places where they don't feel equipped, but you'll figure it out. Or empower them by not actually telling them what I see, some of the opportunities, some of the obstacles, and just saying, hey, do what you want. I find myself that oftentimes in those scenarios, I'm actually letting the individuals down. I'm letting the organization down because then I'm managing them. I'm keeping them from true growth through some uncomfortable change, through actually working through hard problems. And I'm not actually empowering them by saying, do whatever you want, because I or somebody else is coming around on the backside and saying, actually do it this way. Or the customer is saying that wasn't good enough. And so getting really clear, being honest, staying in it when things get uncomfortable. I think those are some of the core pieces on people-centered leadership that personally I missed on the front end. And I think that a lot of us miss when we just look at the surface instead of actually getting in there and saying, this is another person who I care about, who I want to see succeed, who is frankly, one of the major drivers of us being a great impact in this community. If I were in their shoes, what would I want this to look like so that I could feel meaningful, important, informed, and absolutely known and valued for where I work?
Yeah. And you've hit on it quite a bit, but just if you could really hone in, give us a little bit on like how do leaders find that balance between the two leadership styles? Because it clearly requires both. So how do they find the balance
Yeah.
in there?
I you know, trial and error is a really good friend. Trial and error with a posture as a leader that is, I'm not going to get everything right, but together we're going to do what's right. And that means that I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm going to come, I'm going to own it. I'm going to apologize for some of these things. I think the other thing is that the more clear and the more communicative, I think that's a word. Otherwise, we're making it up and we're flying with it. But the more I communicate, the more that the times where it feels more command and control, because there may be more directive action. There may be more specific objectives. There may be more tight guardrails on some of the things that we do. The more I communicate why, and the more I pay attention to, have I gotten a lot of input from people, even though this decision and the way that we are approaching this may have been made by me? Do I have that? Am I listening? Is the tone that I'm coming at this with one where I'm under stress? I don't have margin. I'm feeling all the walls cave in. So now my lid's just blown, and I'm more of a volcano saying, just get this done. We got to do this. And we got to do this because we're behind the eight ball and like that's a symptom of something else that happened long ago. But if I'm paying attention to some of those things, if I got the right inputs coming, when I am more clear and directive and considerate inside of being very kind of, here's what we're doing, the clarity can be received. And for me, some of the things that I've found as balance in that is, how can I be as much on the front end of the annual goals, of onboarding folks, hiring new people on projects? How can I if we go use a football analogy and we got 100-yard field, how can I be abundantly clear on why and what we are trying to do in the first 10 yards? Just so much so that then everybody has room to run and to make decisions and to do what they need to do, and are empowered to act and have the resources to act so that they can run for 90 yards under kind of this mutually agreed upon vision or this understanding of what we're trying to accomplish. Because sometimes when I'm ambiguous on the front end and I come in on those last 10 yards and I pull everybody back and say, oh, we got to go back to the 50-yard line because we just all this stuff had to be done differently. I find that usually if I can be much more clear at the beginning of the year with the vision, with a project, with new hires, that on the front end really plays out well as you keep going, to be able to turn around and say, okay, now that I've cast a vision, now that I've clarified, now that I've said these things, I get to come into a support role, a remove obstacles, a coach through these things. But if we don't have those front parameters, it's really hard to come in and do that without saying like, let me pull that out and actually say, just go do this.
Yeah. Right. No, I think that's amazing. And I think like trial and error, like you said from the beginning, because for people-centered leadership, we are people first. So we have to remember that we're going to grow
Yeah.
and all of those things. So,
Yeah.
and for those listening, we would love to hear how you balance between the two, or maybe you struggle with one, or you might have some questions on advice for the other. So thank you so
Yeah.
much. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Jasmine.
So Jasmine's husband's a coach, and I think even in the coaching world, I've heard more college football, professional basketball, et cetera, talk about caring about people. You know, even them have gotten away from command and control. I'm sure they coach command and control, but they
Yeah.
talk about being more people centered. And so I think it's been interesting to see this pendulum move a little bit. And I don't know how long, last decade especially.
Yeah.
Um, so many of us, somebody listening today is trying to coach one of their people into becoming more people centered leader. I've had them in my career. I've had some command and control leaders that are very effective and get a lot and accomplish a lot. And so, what advice would you give to the person and how to coach a command and control leader to be more people centered?
Man, this is a great question, and it is an issue that so many of us face, and so much of leadership, of managing another person, of providing vision, it there's it's so hard to get some specific tangible data or feedback to be able to engage and say, this is the specific type of example that we are talking about when we're talking about command and control leadership, when we're talking about the toxic workplace environment or the toxic team member. It is so hard to pin that into specific actions, to specific behaviors. So if I'm sitting there, and actually just this week was with a wonderful person who feels as though they are stuck in going up in their organization, that folks that advance in the organization understand some magic secret or have some keys that they don't have because the specificity is not there. And it's just vague of like, we see potential in you, and we don't really have an answer for why you haven't gotten a promotion or why we moved you from this department to this department, but like keep at it. And that is so challenging in any circumstance, but especially in command and control um, because they're going to do what they continue to do. And so if I'm in that seat, a couple of things. One is, how can I get extremely specific on what is happening? So whether that is using something to engage with their team, whether that is coming around more to be involved, whether that is doing the old school management by walking around, whatever you have to do, get some specific data, some specific behaviors and activities that you can talk about, not just the, well, I heard so-and-so say, and not just the, it really seems like it has to be really clear. And it has to be measured against something. Seth Godin says culture is people like us do things like this. So if leaders in our organization are mission driven and always focus on people before end result, before profit, whatever that is, then we have to have some specificity in our agreed upon values, our core values, like most people call them, that just says, that's not something we do here. And for you to be a we do it differently. So specific data, specific target for some of the actions and the approaches that we take. And then I would encourage them, I kind of flip it into, and think about how you enjoy being led. Give me some of the best leaders, managers, coaches you've had. Give me some of the ones that weren't your favorite. And when we put that mirror in front of folks, it usually is a great starting place for them to say, with data and with guardrails on what it looks like to lead in this organization, oh, I see how that specific instance or this pattern might be connected to some of those things. So we need some specificity, some guardrails, and being able to put something back in front of them to say, put yourself in the other person's shoes. How would you want it if you were in the opposite? And that would be where I would start. And then as leaders, we got to close loops. We got to follow up and follow through. And it can't just be a one and done conversation. That is a growth process, walking through folks with that.
That's great advice. This is again, our discussions are always about leadership. I think one of the things that we've done to help coach our execs or our leaders is we ask for feedback. And so be that in a 360 environment, a 360 evaluation, or just recently we did SurveyMonkey on our execs, but we asked the Gallup questions. Does my boss care about me as a person? You know, does my boss ask for input? You know, just those textbook Gallup questions are what people are looking for, and help coach our people through that. They can just kind of see, you know, where they're at. And so, but I think this is an important discussion for y'all listening to have. Jon is a tremendous coach and leader. If you want to learn more about Jon and Leadwell, go to leadwell.com and see what he has. Reach out to him. You can reach out to me and I'll be glad to connect you. So Jon, thanks for taking the time to share with us today. Thanks everybody for taking 10 minutes out of your time to take 10 to be with us. And we hope that we can encourage your leadership, help you grow as a leader and inspire you. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, and remember to always, with Jasmine and I, remember always lead with love.
Always.
Thank you. Thank you, Jon.
Thanks, y'all. This is wonderful.